Right.
Did you have any trouble? I mean, where you were, I mean, with like rebels and stuff like that out in those countries as well? Because
we had troubles in Kazakhstan. The worst thing was corrupt officials. The whole country was in sort of breakdown. You can't believe that, they have rockets that go to the moon and what have you, take off from, there's a big space station, because everywhere we went was so primitive. Like when you landed at the airport, the first thing you get is you show your passport and he'd say, "You've got big problem." And you'd say, "Yeah, what's the problem?" And again, I'd come back to my school days, but I'm anti-establishment. I hate people abusing their authority. I respect authority, but not when people abuse. "You got big. What's the problem?" "You can't come in." "Why not?" "Because I need $100." And I'd say, "FRO, you're not getting it. Try it on some other mug." And Joe's a panicker. And Joe would say, "Nigel, just give him the money. He'll arrest us. He'll put us back." And I'd say, "No, F off. You're not getting the money. Try it on someone else. You're a disgrace to your country." And that wasn't too bad at the airport.
So they would let you in still?
But then, I think they'd get a bit embarrassed and think, "I'll try it on the next mug," But then that wasn't so scary. But then you'd be driving along and we had it was quite complicated, Kazakhstan. You had to get a visa. And you like your mountaineering, and there's a mountain in Kazakhstan, you probably know it, just outside Almaty, called the Cantegri Mountain, which is their equivalent of Everest.
Yeah.
And there was this guy, his name might come to, but I can't think it now. But basically, he was a Kazakh hero because he had climbed Cantegri, and as a bit of propaganda, they'd allowed him to go, because you weren't in those days, the old Iron Curtain, part of Russia, you weren't allowed out of Kazakhstan. They allowed him to go to Everest, and he became the first Kazakh to climb Everest.
Did he?
And so he was allowed to set up a company where obviously you get your mountaineers from around the world want to come and climb Cantegri. So you did it through him. So he'd get you your visa, your Sherpas, your cook, etc. So I don't know how Joe found him through a German guy. And basically we booked with him to climb Cantegri. So we've got our guides.
Wow.
We were never intended to,
okay.
but the authorities thought we were. So we've got an interpreter, we've got guides, we've got a cook. And instead of going up Cantegri, we clear off and go down the Ili Delta fishing, which was a hell of a journey to get there. But you'd get roadblocks, and it was quite scary. Middle of the night, roadblock, and soldiers with guns want to look at all your papers and your passports and your visas. And some of them were legit, some looked more like just desperado bandits. No, it was quite
That's
scary
interesting.
times.
Oh, so he was a great decoy then, wasn't he, with his being a known mountaineer? And
yeah, but he wasn't with us. If he'd have been with us, you'd have felt a bit safer. He wasn't
right.
And you used to see all these dodgy characters. It was funny because when we were flying home in those early days, I went a few times, you'd fly home via Vienna. And on the flight from Almaty to Vienna, there'd be all these real gangster-looking men in their 20s and 30s with sort of, looked like nightclub bouncers, but in Armani suits and, dark glasses. But they were never on the flight back. And when we asked Kazbek, his name might have been, but when he asked him, he said, basically they used to fly to Vienna, steal BMWs and Mercedes, and then drive them back to Kazakhstan. It was like real mafia. And, in the hotel, you'd see the mafia around. But the scariest thing we ever had was one day we were fishing. And I mean, when I say you're in the middle of nowhere in the Ili Delta, you really are. I mean, we nearly got lost once. Chris Tarrant wanted to come and he came with us. And I didn't think we were going to see him again because Joe and I went off on an adventure. And we said, we might not be home tonight, Chris. And we took a tent and we took a big drum of petrol and we went off. And we were gone 5 days and we were lost. And we had like just a little treasure map. And you got no idea of what these... You'd be on a main river, then you'd go through a little side stream where you couldn't see where you were because the reeds were so high, and you'd come out into a lagoon like a lake, and then you go through. We had like this little treasure. We've been 5 days. We've got no food left. We've got no petrol left to cook with. We've got a tiny little bit left for the motor on the boat, and we're really getting worried. And
I bet.
Anyway, we eventually got back. But during that trip, when we're in the middle of nowhere, we heard a boat coming, and we didn't know if that was going to be good news or bad news. And this boat pulled out, and it was the two biggest desperados you've ever seen. And they've got a rifle. And on the seat in the boat, you could see they had a little cardboard ammunition box. And our guide was a guy called Yuri. Now, we'd been there a few times now, and we're good friends with Yuri. He had a tank. He was commander of a Russian tank regiment in the army for something like 12 years, and he had his tank regiment tattooed on his chest. Hardest man you'll meet. And he wasn't really our fishing guide, he was our minder. And he was really worried. These guys pulled up their boat. We're tied to the shore and we're fishing, and you could see them looking in. There's like, there's a nick on, there's multiplier. There's more money in that boat than they've seen in their lives. And you could see the way their minds were going. And I'm a real anti-smoker, but when I go on trips like that, I always buy 200 Marlboro at the airport. And first thing you do is give them a packet of fags each, and that's great. But then you're thinking they're looking at the other packets, and I'm getting really worried. And they're talking to Yuri. You could tell Yuri was anxious. And we had a couple of cans of beer in the boat. So I gave them a can of beer each. And then I walked up onto the bank, and there was a tree with a bit of a V, and I wedged a beer can in there. And I said to him, can I have a go with his rifle to try and shoot the beer can? And I said, tell him I'll pay for the ammunition. And he liked the idea of that. And I said, I pointed at the box, I said, how many bullets has he got? And he opened it, and there was something like 11 bullets in there. Wow. So I gave him $11 and said, like, $1 a bullet, and he was happy with that. Yeah. So I'm lying there, and I'm firing at this can. And when we were kids, we used to go on outward bound courses and go, rifle ranges, and it's not that hard. The can wasn't that far away, but I kept missing. And Joe whispered in my ear, he said, I didn't think you liked guns. I said, I don't, I'm just trying to use up all his ammunition, because I was frightened as we went off. He was going to shoot us in the back and have all our money and everything. I said, at least it's going to be a fair fight now. There's 3 of us and 2 of them.
It's good thinking, Nigel. Yeah. You got back then, obviously.
We got back. But I mean, seriously, when you're there, I've never been anywhere really as remote as that. I mean, like Suriname and India
you could disappear out in those places.
But if they'd have killed us, sunk our boat, no one would know even where to start looking, And
that's a good... What about other European